Hello and welcome to the first edition of the 2020-2021 Zoomcast. And I'm Andrew Bishop, Assistant Head of School at the Alexander Dawson School. And for our first Zoomcast of this year, I've got the great pleasure of welcoming our new Head of School, Roxanne Stansbury. Welcome, Roxanne.
Thank you. Hello, Andrew. How are you today? Thanks for welcoming to this really important message. I'm looking forward to being able to talk about what we do here at Dawson and why it's so important that every year we choose a through line.
Totally. And I think, before we get into it, I just wanted to say, I think I'm saying it as a parent, but also an employee here, just kind of kudos to you, Roxanne, for kicking us off in such a fantastic fashion for the start of this school year in what is certainly unusual times. I think our entire community, from graduates, our board, our faculty, our staff, our parents, are just feeling so incredibly confident in your leadership and secure in the fact that Dawson is in such, capable and caring hands. So thanks for all that you continue to do.
Well, I appreciate those kind words. And I have to say, it is such an interesting time to be in leadership. But that being said, I can't think of a community that I would rather be a part of as we face all of this adversity, because Dawson is that educational home for me, where I know that everybody here is committed to doing what's right for kids. And as long as we all have that as our number one priority, I know that we're going to be able to accomplish and champion any of the challenges that come our way.
Yeah, totally. And I think what you just, spoke about too are some of those call it gravitational elements, right? That keep us tethered, to the work that we do, and to the mission of our school and the core beliefs that guide, each and every one of us. Yeah. I think the other, thing, this is what this Zoomcast is about, is our through line, for the year, which acts as, a directional indicator, but also a gravitational force, for us as a school. And so I know you've been instrumental, in using through lines, previously, and maybe, for our viewers and listeners out there, if you can talk a little bit more just about, how Dawson has used through lines in the past, what some of them have been, but also too, how is it and why is it, through lines are important, as a theme for the entirety of a year for all constituencies, of our community.
Yeah, I mean, through lines are so powerful. And so if you look at Dawson, we're always in this continuous cycle of mapping out the skills that our students need to survive and thrive in a complex and a connected world. So in addition to all of the core knowledge that students learn in subjects like reading and writing and math, we're also identifying opportunities to emphasize the relevant knowledge, such as global awareness and financial literacy, health issues. So a through line, it both anchors the content that students are synthesizing, but it also provides a lens in which our students can find a common thread. And so through lines promote meaningful connections that will allow our students to understand the why behind their learning. And, here's what we know about the brain. And I always say this, that through lines really represent brain compatible teaching strategies. We know that for our neurons to begin the networking process that takes place for information that needs to come into our brains, that it has to appeal to either our emotions or provide a meaningful connection. And, I think back about the example is that when I bought my new minivan, I instantly became aware of how many gray Toyota Siennas there are on the road. And that's just an indication of how our brain is constantly seeking patterns and connections and that need for personal meaning. So a through line provides that context, and it allows our students to see the relevance in what they're learning.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think there's a stickiness, to them. And I was reminded of that yesterday on our COVID-19 task force call, when one of our parents, used a through line from 2 years ago and said, ultimately right now what we need to be doing is choosing courage over comfort as it relates to some of the social interactions, other families are doing. And I'm like, there it is, right? How is it that you have these like little nuggets of knowledge right, that both parents, and students are continually coming back to. And I thought that that was, a really interesting moment, yesterday as we were, having that conversation, but I was also getting ready for this one, as well. So they have this stickiness and staying power that I think are really, really relevant.
Yeah. Think of it as a long strip of Velcro.
Right.
And think about growing up when you were a student, you always sat in those classrooms where you wanted to raise your hand and say, like, why do I need to know this? And I think if you look at our students now, that question, it comes with a great deal of truth, because our students can Google information whenever they need it. So when they say, like, why do I need to know this? I can ask Siri and get the answer so much quicker than how I'm getting it delivered in this classroom. That through line, it helps them to truly understand something and see how it fits within the context of what they already know.
Yeah. No, and you talked earlier about how through lines help, and I'll say not just students, right, but our parents and our faculty and staff as well understand the why, of certain things. And so, kind of my next question for you would be is, what is this year's through line? Why did we go about, choosing it? And I think most importantly too, for our listeners and viewers out there, is understanding the how we incorporated faculty voice, into this decision as well.
Yeah. So our through line is discover your voice, and it's a really appropriate message for our students as they're learning more about who they want to be in this world. And they are learning what they want to stand for, and they're learning how they want to be seen and heard as an individual. So 2 years ago or 3 years ago, our through line was untold stories, and we challenge students to seek out viewpoints that is often left out of the headlines. We taught them how to be attentive listeners. We talked about what it's like to connect with perspectives that are different than their own. We encourage them to select book titles that feature people who do not look like them and may have a viewpoint that could open up their understanding of the world. And then 2 years ago, our through line was Brave Voices. And in each unit that we taught, teachers would ask students to find somebody throughout history whose brave voice was able to make a change. And students analyzed the character traits needed to express a brave voice, and they compared and contrasted leaders in this world and how they exercised bravery, to make a stand. Last year, our through line was courage over comfort, and we really helped kids gain the competencies they needed to understand that to be courageous, it meant having to be vulnerable and live outside of their comfort zone. And what does that look like when people are deciding to push themselves out of their comfort zone? And so this year we are taking the next step in this process of advocacy, and from learning the foundational competencies of listening and learning with untold stories, to researching and identifying character traits with brave voices, by learning the competencies of vulnerability last year with courage over comfort. And so it's timely right now for us to have Discover Your Voice as our through line, because what we're doing is really empowering our students to be the leaders of the future by discovering their voice, and an individual voice that reflects thoughtfulness, empathy, responsible research, and global mindedness.
No, for sure. And I think, one thing I just want to keep pressing you on, because I think already, you've been a leader at Dawson, for so many years, but now that you're, call it 3 months in, to your headship, and ultimate, leadership, responsibility, I've been struck by how you're a servant leader, and essentially are, serving the needs of not just our students and parents, but also our faculty, and I bring that up because I think one thing you've already done, a masterful job of is ensuring that faculty voice, is heard. Right. And so maybe, taking a step back over the summer and even talking about how, it was a faculty group, that discovered their voice to say, you can be the ones to help make institutional decisions that are going to be enacted throughout the entirety of the year. So maybe just kind of, providing a little bit more color and commentary, on how our faculty came to help us discover this through line for the year.
Yeah, I think that's the powerful statement right there, is that there was a time where one person on this campus decided what the through line
Right.
was. And then we realized, like, wait, we need more voices around the table. And here we are 4 years in, and we turned it over to the people who are working closest with our students. And when I look at the role of the teacher, all I all I can see is how much it's changed. I believe our faculty, when they enter the school year this year, they all feel like first year teachers, and I'm talking about people who've been working for 20 some years in this field. They still feel like first year teachers, from a new learning management system that we gave them to tackle, to designing lessons that integrate and engage both in-person and distance education teachers, our students, to creating lessons that respond to the financial and social injustices created by this pandemic. Like, all of the work that they do in their classroom looks different, feels different. It's changed so much. And so our teachers have always been taxed with social, physical, cognitive, and emotional well-being of each and every child. But this year, their responsibility for looking out for the health and wellness of their students, it requires nonstop vigilance. And we ask them to do all of this behind a mask and 6 feet away from students, and all the tricks and all the protocols that they rely on for connections and classroom management. They're no longer viable options. So they're pivoting quickly to unwritten strategies. And I think it's important that teachers discover their voice in this process. So during Teacher Academy, Dr. Wiley, our new Director of Teaching and Learning, he carved out 30 minutes each day during Teacher Academy for teachers to take care of themselves. Employees were given choices to virtually engage in yoga and mindfulness or campus walks. And I believe that we want our teachers to use their voice this year as they communicate their needs for support. So much is going on in this world. So much is going on with social justice issues that our teachers are trying to process, as human beings outside of the classroom. And that takes a toll. I believe so much is going on about just worry and concern for their own family members when it comes to this virus. And so we have to take care of our educators this year, and we have to make sure that we're not burning them out from the fatigue of all this constant change. We need to hear their voice, and we need them to be able to discover their voice and how they are going to navigate this path of how much has changed in their career.
No, totally. And I think, my kind of two takeaways or two powerful moments of Teacher Academy, for me is, one was that idea of discovering your voice is also discovering this idea of it's okay to ask for help, right? And discovering the wherewithal to say, like, in this moment, I need some rejuvenation, right? Or I need to take a beat. How is it that in order for me to take care of others, I need to take care of myself? And, as you alluded to, Dr. Wiley, putting in, these meta moments, right? And, moments of wellness and mindfulness. And I think, now more than ever, just like we're asking, our parents and our students to have the wherewithal and have the voice to say, I need some time right now, or this is my worry. How is it that we're giving our faculty members the same exact platform to discover their voice to say, you are such an invaluable member of our community, and for our community to be great, you need to be strong. In order for you to be strong, you need to be taking care of yourself. So I think that was one of my takeaways. Another one of my takeaways too was, I think a lot of discover your voice is coming out of, yes, this idea of taking care of, ourselves and taking care of each other, but it's also coming out of, the social unrest, that transpired, throughout the course of the summer, right? And we were living in, as Brandon's been talking about, yes, with a pandemic, but also an epidemic, as it relates to, social unrest. And I think what was powerful for me during Teacher Academy is this idea of discovering not just people's voices, but their stories, and giving them the platform, to share their story. And, I shared honestly and openly about, my own privilege and about how we need to have yeah, the courage, but also the opportunities to say, I'm going to discover my voice, to say, by giving up some of my unearned privilege, right, I can be gaining strength by listening to others and reallocating, power, right, across a more diverse, group of people. So I think that was really, really important, for me. When we think about Teacher Academy, it's also preparing, our teachers to be interacting, with our students and our parents. So from your seat, what can parents do to help kids, discover their voice, throughout the course of this year?
Yeah. Well, I always tell parents that questions are golden, and the conversations that you are facilitating as a parent while you're driving in the car or eating dinner, that it really shapes the fabric of your family's framework. And so to embrace every moment, every family's on the go. And I think we all miss that traditional, let's all sit down at dinner and have conversations. But the conversations are just as powerful if you just carve out time for them as you're taking, the dog for a walk or you're driving to soccer practice. So I think a Throughline is a perfect springboard for those conversations. If a child is having a conflict with another student or struggling with how a friend made them feel bad that day, then the Throughline can be an empowering message. So saying to your child, like, how can you discover your voice in this relationship? Or, what would it look like if you were to discover your voice and share your feelings with your friend? I think that families could use the Throughline to frame conversations about current events. Sometimes we make judgments about others' actions before asking, why do you think they felt compelled to discover their voice at this time? Or what may have happened in the beginning or at the root of this issue to end in this type of expression? So I really encourage families to utilize that, our Throughline, for their conversations, because it will be the Velcro that also helps connect your children to what's important to your family. And I think it's important for every child to be able to say, like, this is what my family stands for. Yeah. This is what's important to us. That's going to shape who they become and how they show up in this world.
No, I mean, I like how you said that, and essentially, it's a springboard to conversations. But you also said something that really stuck with me, which is discovering your voice isn't just about making statements, but it's about asking questions, right? And I think sometimes, particularly in schools, we're great at teaching kids how to answer questions. We need to always work on teaching them how to ask really good questions, right? In the process of, discovering your voice, they can ask thoughtful questions that they're curious about, that say, great, this is different from what I previously believed. Why? Right? Or, this is different from what I've been told, in the past. Right. Why? And I think that it's by answering those how and why questions, right, that students are able to not just find their voice, but also navigate, the world that one day they're going to be a part of, and hopefully lead. And to that end, as we think about, our students, in particular our 8th graders, entering high school, and then, 4 years later entering college, and then the workforce, why is it so important for, students to find their voice here at Dawson before they enter, the high school, arena or college?
Yeah, I think that being able to find your voice while you are still shaping who you are as an individual is just part of that coming of age process. And I love that we get to make the space for it here on our campus. And you can see when you hear from our alumni, when they come back and talk about their high school experience, they all rose to the surface as leaders when it comes to public purpose work, when it comes to being able to be representatives of underserved voices, or making sure that all voices are around the table. I think it's important for our students and our alumni to understand that the onus is on them now. The responsibility is going to be on them to tackle the challenges or the inequities that are being created by this pandemic. And it's a huge undertaking. And we're going to need them to be really empathetic ethical leaders who are digging deep and using our through lines, our untold stories through line, and our brave voices and our courage over comfort to do what's right in a time where having a brave voice or discovering your voice may not be popular. And I want them to have that confidence to do it.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's, more than anything else, if you think about, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, it's messy, right? It's messy in terms of the makeup, but it's also messy too as, I think students, are continuing to try on ideas, right? And discovering what they really believe, based upon their experiences, conversations, but also, this idea of, testing where those boundaries are, right? And where the boundaries of their own thinking, resides. And I think it's by, with all that messiness, they develop a muscle, right? And a muscle for having those conversations, a muscle for listening really actively, but then also too, a muscle for pushing through, right? And to say, I'm not afraid to stand for this.
Right.
I'm not afraid to talk about that.
Right.
And those are some of the things that, I think as we've talked about, as we send our kids off, even if they do go to, a really, really big high school, and there's 2,000 kids there, they've got the courage and they've discovered their voice. So they enter as 9th graders, with the capacity and the capabilities, to make their voices heard. I think those are really kind of, impactful lessons that go way beyond, right? Just it's way more important than what math class you're going to be in as a 9th grader, or how many APs you take as a sophomore. If we can prepare those kids to sort of engage those conversations and have the courage, to think and to speak honestly and openly, we're doing our job, as a school. So this year's Throughline, it is tied to some of the initiatives that we have, related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, curious, Roxanne, as head of school, what are some DEI goals you have for this year? But then also too, like, why is it important that, when we think about listening actively, doing research, how is listening and research connected to diversity, equity, and inclusion work as well?
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to the diversity work, the key is that we live our diversity statement, that they're not just, words that we profess, but that we make sure that all voices and perspectives on this campus are around the table for decision making, and for the conversations that shape how we live our mission and who we intend to be. So specifically, Andrew, you and I are working together this year to audit our curriculum and our organizational structures, like hiring and admissions, and the depth of belonging that constituents feel when they are part of our community. And we're looking to work with an outside consultant to conduct this audit, so that it leads to a job description for a full-time director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But it also goes to that second part of the question that you're talking about, which is, why is it so essential right now that we have goals for how our students are understanding the role of diversity, equity, and inclusion in their learning journey? And I often get really upset by the fact that I don't think that our students have enough role models to look to as they're trying to be really discerning researchers, or while they're trying to reserve immediate judgments and try to listen to both sides. They're dealing with a world that there's so much polarity, and we need our kids to be the bridgers, the soon to be adults who are going to come in and try to find ways for people to join forces and collaborate as they make change in this world. And to do that at Dawson, we have to constantly be modeling, what does it sound like to be a really responsible learner who can listen attentively, reserve judgment, and then take it upon ourselves to go do really responsible research so that we are not making judgments that are not founded, or trying to find the assertions in any kind of story, so that our students are discovering their own voice. I think it's important for all parents to understand that we are not here to tell our students which voice to have. We're here just to create the space and the opportunities for our students to find their individual voice. And that's an essential key, that kind of personalized path that our students are able to engage in while they're here at Dawson.
Yeah, 100%. I also think it's one of those, seminal moments, in a young person's life, right? When they realize that their voice sounds different than their favorite teacher's voice or their parents' voice. And they realize that they've flexed their own mental muscle, and have turned a corner to say, this is what I believe. And what I believe now is based upon, yes, the values my family has, the value my school has, the values that I've discovered, doing, my own research. And I think that, really it's that flexibility and this idea of, all of us are, continuing on our personal evolution to become the best possible versions of ourselves. And that's what education is. And that holds true, not just with diversity, equity, and inclusion work, but all work, right, that encompasses, what we do each and every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe I'll leave us with one final question. I think that will also kind of tease probably an upcoming Zoomcast that we've got, kind of coming along as well. So as a leadership team, we've taken on the work of, putting diversity, equity, and inclusion strategic initiatives at the forefront. Some of the conversations we're having as a heads council and that we're having as a leadership team. Can you maybe just give us a quick, sneak peek, into some of those things, Roxanne, that are coming down the pike, as it relates to that strategic initiative and the work that we're going to set out, to do this year?
Yeah. I think we're so focused on inclusivity. We want everybody who is part of our Dawson community to feel a sense of belonging. And we want to listen really intently to our student voice. As a school, we can sit back and talk about every initiative that we have taken over the past 5 years, quite honestly, since our diversity statement was composed. And we've done some great things. We've had amazing speakers come in, and we've hosted some exhibitions of learning that are focused on cultural awareness for everyone. We've had We Need Diverse Books Day and helped all of our students to start to hear the perspectives and the stories of people who don't look like them. But at the end of the day, it always comes down to this. Do our students, do our teachers, do our parents, do they feel like they belong when they're here on our campus? And until we can make sure that everybody's answer to that question is yes, we are never going to stop taking on more action steps that will help us find any root causes that are preventing everybody to feel that sense of belonging. And so, some things that we're looking at, as I mentioned before, starting with selecting a consultant who can help us do some audits while also providing training to parents, to students, to our leadership teams, to our faculty about the best ways to keep working on our own cultural competency journeys. We're also going to be launching our search for a new director of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which will be the first time on our Dawson campus to have somebody whose sole focus and responsibility will just be centered on how all of our constituents on our campus are continuing to grow, learn, and be advocates for all voices.
Well, thank you for sharing your voice, today with me and with all of our listeners and viewers out there. Thank you for the conversation, and more importantly, thanks for the leadership you're providing to the Alexander Dawson School community. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you, Andrew.